Hello and welcome to this episode of the Moment podcast. I'm here today with Kyrsten, Neirum, and Raine. My name is Bas, your host, and today we're gonna talk about the revival of the gods, going into different facets of what is going on, very much building from the Where is God's Wife talks that me and Neirum had done earlier. So first off, I would say hello to everyone. Welcome and glad to have you on. First of all,
thanks, man.
Good morning.
It's always a pleasure, brother.
Yeah, glad to be here.
And with that said, I know you're new here, Kyrsten, but I don't know if you've watched, the Where's God's Wife talk.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we should go ahead and start with maybe that to catch up the listeners who have not listened to it, and Kyrsten with it. What do you think, Neirum?
Yeah, you want me to take this away on that? Okay, so a year ago, me and my buddy were just talking, and we were drinking one night together, and he said, man, it just feels like, God is up above us and he's mad, and then Mother Earth is down below us. He don't know what's going on, and we're in a cosmic custody battle. I was like, dude, that's revolutionary. Like, yeah, where is God's wife? Like maybe that's why he's mad, but like there's not a feminine aspect to the other part of the equation here. And that just sent us down all kinds of rabbit hole, wormhole places. And here we are now. So yeah, like where is the missing divine feminine in mainstream religion? And it's something been lost through the annals of time that we need to reclaim, and then that goes into all these other gods and goddesses that, we need to revisit. And that's all in line, with Carl Jung's sort of thesis on archetypes living within us, these archetypes or gods living within us, and how do you give life to them again to open up a brighter future? I don't know. How's that? Is that about it?
I would definitely say like that kind of sums it up, and that's kind of I guess what we're here for regarding this talk regarding the different archetypes and what is going on kind of in the culture and kind of like how to do that exactly, this revival of the gods. And
I do remember listening to that. That's where I remember Neirum's voice.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a question I asked myself probably since the beginning of my life, because it's a missing aspect, and it's an aspect I actually do a lot of research on, as you know, and work with a lot. So very cool.
Yeah, like what are your thoughts on this, Kyrsten?
Well, yeah, I definitely think there's a gap in the human timeline where once that aspect was taken away, it created such a dualistic reality that kind of split everybody off and separated each of us. And it makes me think of the demiurge from the Gnostic stories.
Yep.
Him creating a false reality.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, mainstream religions that demonized women. And that's a point further that me and my friend and Bass and everybody here went is, what if the devil is a woman? And what if God and the devil got a divorce, and that's why, you know, he paints her like Baphomet with horns and stuff like that, like he's mad at his ex-wife or something, you know, like drawing a mustache on a family photo or whatever.
I can see that.
It's like, this old so-and-so, this old woman, you know, she done me dirty, and she's an old goat, you know, like that's just something some grouchy old divorced dad would say, you know.
Also wanna.
That's another weird.
Yeah.
That's another weird thing. Is like all of the good guys and the bad guys are all dudes. You know, like where are the women at? Are they just dudes fighting in the sky all day long? Like what's that about?
I have to do a little more research on that, like the medieval timelines, to see where organized religion really took off in war. And I think because of war becoming intertwined with religion, that's where the split off kind of started to begin, because it became less about actual enlightenment and more about power. And Mars is masculine, so I feel like just went in that direction. Because in Ireland, like the actual place is named after only goddesses, and I'm sure that's like all over Europe and a lot of native cultures here, but Ireland specifically has been the rabbit hole I'm in, and you see like they didn't even really think too much about like the father archetype for a long time.
I don't know, for me, all of this kind of also makes me think regarding kind of what me and Bustle, who couldn't be here today, sadly, talked about regarding, you know, the what he called solar madness, and that kind of like I guess like hyper rationality going on within the culture, kind of the, you know, the splitting off of, well, other aspects of, you know, human experience in that sense. You know, the masculine unconsciousness that he talked about, the Anima wounding, and kind of like, you know, the wounding of the divine feminine by, well, I guess like the demonization of it, but also guess just like the slow, I guess, loss that occurred way before any of that kind of happened. And yeah, I don't know, I kind of feel like to some degree that this kind of also goes into the maybe kind of some of the UFO kind of territory too, that me and Raine looked into like quite a while ago as well. Kind of like, you know, that I guess that rational or that hyper rational kind of approach to things, you know, which leads to, I guess, AI and all kinds of other, I guess, technological things that are going on. But then there's also kind of like, this I guess conflict going on, and like we talked about in that particular talk, very much, I guess, like, this disconnect from the what the Jungians would call the collective unconscious, you know, and with that the gods, and then you could kind of bring up, like, you know, the UFOs and the ancient aliens, you know, that some people in the modern age talk about as well, and these kind of things. But
ancient aliens, they're like trying to realize these things, but they are still fixed within the hyper-rational worldview. Like, I just see for you know, hundreds of years this trajectory of the Western civilization that has deified the hyper-rational. Like, we know something's wrong. We know the pieces aren't fitting together. And so we hit these bottlenecks and start freaking out, and everyone starts pointing fingers at each other, seeing the adversary as other people instead of going inward. hanging on to these old traditions that keep getting more and more watered down. You know, like Plato talks about kind of like the dangers of writing and learning things literally and through transcription rather than, you know, really getting your hands dirty and understanding these things like they did with oral cultures and handing things down. And it's just kind of turned into this Saturnian energy, this negative Saturnian energy that is devouring any new iteration that is trying to appear, so much so that part of us has detached, kind of like soul loss.
Yeah.
And that is becoming this new living mythology of the UFO that's popping up now.
Yep.
But I think in a weird way, we were trying to realize something, you know, like you split apart for a reason to put it all back together again.
Yeah.
I think that is the solar madness and the culmination of it. I think we're just hitting the brink of with basically artificial intelligence is my guess.
Seeing how far
They need to
take.
come on down from them UFOs and touch grass.
Like we're like trying to realize that mycelium network of the natural world.
Yeah.
So we created the technological one of the internet and the digital world.
Well, I think the imagery of the UFO is interesting too, because, you know, with the Where's God's Wife talk, you know, we went on about the Dinah in Native American religion, where you have Father Sky and Mother Earth, and this Father Sky iconography with UFOs, I think, is really apt. You know, these detached, big-headed, bug-eyed people thinking out things all day. They don't touch grass. They don't come down to earth where the mother is, and they're just detached. You know, and you got to come back together, like you said earlier. You got to blow apart and come back together to make it all work, I guess, like a heartbeat. Is that the heartbeat of reality? I don't know.
It's true. You know, that what's interesting is I was telling, is it bass or bass? I get those words mixed up all the time.
Either is fine with me.
Potato.
Okay. Well, I was telling you about a book I'm reading called Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. And it's that story about a man who ended up calling himself Jude Star at some point, who comes from the Choctaw tribe. The Cheyenne people, the Choctaw, the Navajo. I know in this new age, we have a lot of people who have like watered down the ancient alien talk and like call themselves star seeds. And there's a lot of, you know, lore about how that even just like unraveled. But a lot of native tribes, because they had their peyote ceremonies and all of their like, you know, shamanic practices, a lot of them like believed and spoke of being connected to certain star systems and coming from there. And in this book, he talks about why he calls himself Jude Star or Wandering Star, because their tribe believed they were from the Pleiades and like they're from the Seven Sisters. And it's just really interesting when you go back to a lot of native cultures here, you see that they all have some sort of storyline about the stars and like seeing star people or being them. It's very interesting.
No, definitely.
It's worth getting up there in the stars and taking a look, but yeah, you got to come back home.
Well, and I think we're at the point now, and you see this kind of recurring during war times throughout history, that we've ignored it for so long that it's, you know, piercing through the veil and demanding its attention and being like, hey, you guys need to deal with this before it gets worse.
No, definitely. We went into that with the UFO talk we had done as well. Regarding us, those things, and kind of like how I remember, like also regarding that specific talk with you, Raine, about the zombie kind of myth too, and I guess that goes into like Vervaeke and what he is all on about the zombie myth, and I kind of feel like that's kind of a different way of talking about kind of this same solar madness kind of thing, you know, like obsessed about
Yeah.
brains and those kind of things. But you know, it then also makes me think about what you talked about, Neirum, about like, you know, the empty bookshelf and, you know, things like that. And it kind of makes me
Oh yeah.
think about just how kind of in a way there are different metaphors talking kind of about the disconnect from nature, vitality, and kind of the gods in that sense, you know, kind of symbolizing that general disconnect from that. And I guess you could call it, you know, the darker masculine kind of in a Jungian sense, kind of the more primal side, which, you know, kind of makes sense with nature and all of these things, even with the aliens and with the Greys and, you know, the zombies being cut off from kind of vitality in that sense.
Yeah, did I talk to you about them, those Asgard aliens in Stargate XT1? Like, they're like the little gray UFO dudes. Have we talked about that, or was that somebody else? Because, they had this replicator problem, this artificial intelligence that's run amok, and they can't deal with it because of all their highfalutin technology and ways of thinking. They don't have...
Neirum, you're breaking up.
Is Neirum talking to us from space?
Neirum is talking from space. Maybe.
He's in a spaceship.
Have we discovered how to revive the gods yet?
No, we're just starting off basically with the talk, very introductionary. Basically, just starting off kind of with the premise regarding, you know, what's going on in the culture, kind of like and kind of the cultural.
I mean,
myth.
The revival of the gods has been going on with like comic books. I think that's a big attempt to try and revitalize these archetypes within people. You see how wild people go at Comic-Con and how they dress up as these godlike figures, these superheroes, man. That's a huge part of it right there.
Is that a meaningful step, though? Is it maybe...
That's a good question.
Is it kind of like containment
a meaningful
for the
step.
Real thing?
It attempts to scratch the itch, but, you know, it's the first step. It's good for, I guess, younger audiences especially.
Yeah.
But eventually you gotta move on.
I don't know the answer, but my suspicion is that it's kind of like how social media replaces, you know, real socializing, or how porn replaces real relationships.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
Yep.
I think that's a valid concern to have, to be honest. It's kind of like kind of a replacement in that sense. But, you know, it can also lead to kind of a disconnect to, you know, then think more like in the sense of Peter Pan, you know, and those kind of escapist kind of stories, and lead more into fantasy than I guess like trying to embody kind of the gods in the way that the pagans would try to do. And I guess that's...
I also think...
go ahead.
I was just saying, I think it ties back into the rational mind that creates limits, snow globes.
And I mean, just look at what they've done to the, you know, even just the original Marvel comic book heroes have been made into kind of even further degraded, less soulful versions of themselves. The movies aren't even watchable anymore, right? It used to be entertaining, at least it was fluff. Now it's so soulless that even the most sort of plebeian mind can't extract joy out of it because they fundamentally have nothing to consume. There's no nourishment there spiritually. It's pure shit.
Yeah, it's like a feeding tube of ideology they're shoving down your throat.
Yeah, there's a clear agenda once things go through Hollywood. That's
So
I
that's
guess the
kind of
best
my
you could hope is that it, lights a spark in some people, the people that wanna do the work.
Yeah.
that's kind of my question is just would it be better if we had no appropriation of authentic sort of European spirituality? Or is, I mean, I don't know. For me, Odin in Final Fantasy video games was, significant. I don't, at the
Mm-hmm.
time, I didn't know why I was so interested um, in this sort of antlered warrior king
Mm.
figure on an eight-legged horse. But if I hadn't been exposed to it through that medium,
Yeah.
maybe I wouldn't have developed an authentic interest in it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about the unconscious is like even in this watered down timeline, like those archetypes find themselves in stories, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that I mean, I understand the appropriation, which
Yeah.
kind of waters everything down, but it still allows for people in the surface level to kind of gauge whether or not they're going to go down that path and discover more about it. But
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
yeah,
it speaks to a larger issue of our time where we as the people got to kind of take the reins on these things from here on out and stop relying on Hollywood and our superiors to do these things for us.
I agree.
Well, it
Yeah,
at least used to be entertaining,
100%.
you know? Used to be they could provide competent fluff. Even if
Yeah.
I don't know, it wasn't healthy for us, at least it was enjoyable. Now it's unhealthy and tastes horrible, It's just been
Mm.
totally
Yeah,
Well,
it's,
there's good media in the mix, like if you're not looking at the total mainstream, like there's great
mm,
Yeah.
storylines, like American Gods is one of them. It's got some depth to it.
And as a small artist or, like Base publishing his own books, we
Yeah.
do have more
Mhm.
opportunity than ever to put
Yeah.
our sort of, not mainstream, not big Hollywood ideas and work out there if you want to.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, because
we just
everyone's
need to make a movie now.
Maybe, but um, I do kind of feel though, like regarding stories generally, I think like stories are one important aspect. Yeah, it's kind of one important aspect regarding the gods and the archetypes and kind of like how they're brought back to life, and it's kind of I guess partly that, but I suppose like another aspect of that would be because everything has been as watered down as it is, and kind of like all this kind of solar madness kind of going on with this hyper rationality, kind of like taking things very literal. I kind of do feel like artists would be very important in this aspect as well. Makes me think regarding Bustle that I talked to that kind of for me inspired this talk regarding what he was talking about poetry and kind of what the ancient poets would do, the bards and kind of figures
Oh
like
yeah,
that, and
yeah,
how important they are regarding these ancient traditions as well. If we talk about more I guess Indo-European kind of lens here.
yeah, yeah. Because you have to start as a bard, which means you have to learn poetry if you even want to get to the big like
Yeah.
alchemical stuff. Anyways, yeah, I think everyone should read Bustle's poetry. It really like opens that door without you having to like try so hard and brings you into all these different perspectives that ties into this
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh no, definitely. But I do think kind of generally that I kind of do think that the Bustle, but also I guess many other people that are either listening or out there in the world regarding making such art in different forms that isn't like Hollywood and these kind of things, do feel like they can definitely play a potential role in kind of revitalizing some of that, even though it's just one part of the whole. Because there's much more to it than just stories. There's a whole kind of embodiment with it too, and a lot to, I suppose, figure out too. I mean, just thinking about my own research into these things. It's kind of there's a lot to figure out, a lot of things we don't really understand yet about the old pagan gods, and much to figure out in that sense.
So, in terms of recreating
yeah
traditional practices, if you and I just met in the forest and did some shamanism, would that be authentic? Because I feel like everybody who's ever practiced it in the past had, a tribe that probably existed for thousands of years before them, and they grew up in it, and they absorbed these traditions down to their deepest sort of psychic levels, right?
Yeah.
We will never have that, unfortunately. Is that how we recreate it, though?
I do think we can reforge it, though. I believe that. I think we can reforge it into something that hasn't been done before. Because I don't know how we can go back to that way. With everything we know about the world and jet planes and computers, it's got to be different. But we definitely need it still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about creating a basic structure as well, kind of asking the question of obviously we don't want to get pulled into the appropriation of things and go down dangerous paths with shamanism, but I think it's just a basic structure of seeing what tools and elements and archetypes really you can start with to even develop a new resurrect.
Well, yeah. In the orgy of ideas, they're all related. And I don't think it's watered down or appropriating. I think all of these things over time have just crossbred with so many other things that there's these lines of similarity we can detect in them that grab people, like the comic book stuff, for example. It just changes. You look at your ancestors 1,000 years ago, and then look at you. Are you the same? Are you different? How are you different exactly?
I guess I'm thinking in very literal, what are the actions we perform to revive the gods? And does that mean Bass and I need to meet in Finland, and he needs to show me how to enter shamanic drum trance? Or, I think Tom Marcel is very...
I think it's different for everybody. I think it's going to... Some people might want to do that. Other people might want to do something else. And I think that's the important thing to discuss here. I think now we're cooking with gas. Exactly. How do you embody it? We're flying around this UFO with ideas. Let's land it and touch grass. And feel like, what are we doing when we get out of this UFO? How do we act? How do we revive these gods, these archetypes, whatever you want to call them within us, to open up this future that we need so bad? A bright one, not all this Terminator, Soylent Green, awful Blade Runner shit, in everybody's head in the media,
Yeah.
How do we get away from that?
I think you touched on something interesting there when you say it's going to be different for everyone. I think now more than ever, we are entering a phase where we are less and less detached from national identities. Because these kind of, the gods of old, the gods of nations, and the gods of countries, I think, especially with the internet and with technology, we're all realizing that mycelium network and acknowledging that we're all, of the same people on Earth. And national identities was that old trickster god kind of propelling us through some kind of mental evolution to whatever this next step of humanity is.
I mean,
actually, yeah. Actually, I moved to Florida mainly because there's a small group of women I'm with. We work around reviving the goddess. It's only like 5 to 6 of us, and sometimes we'll try to integrate a new person in to see like where they are, because it's a very intense space. We use mycelium. We meet at someone's house and like we sit together, and some of them are Taino, some of them are from different parts of the Caribbean, and then there's me and like a few other people who have like European ancestry, and some people are native, but like you sit there, it's all women. And because we've gone several sessions together, each journey like gets deeper into like the connection to each other's like subconscious world, and to like seeing each other on these different I guess dimensions of being. And it's really shown me that like doing something as, I mean, not everyone, again, like you guys are saying, like not everyone's going to be doing this and wanting to you know, explore like that, but for me it's really taught me so much about that interconnectedness to everyone, no matter where you come from. And you can kind of see the veil fall down in these situations where you're consistent with a community. Kind of see what everybody's spirit is like heading.
I love referencing this scene from Conan the Barbarian. It's when Conan and his friend are like escaped from this witch, and they're around a campfire, and they're asking each other about what gods do you believe in, who do you pray to, and Sudabai is like, I pray to the four winds, and then Conan's like, well, I pray to Crom, he is in the earth, he is bigger than you, he's stronger than your god, and then Sudabai is like, my god is above your god, he is the sky. And they just laugh, and then they ride off in the sunset. And I think that is the exact vibe that needs to be brought to this new table of discussion of like, how do you revitalize this stuff? Number one, with a sense of humor. You know, that's a part of being stuck in the UFO all day, you know, not touching grass. Like, you don't know what's funny anymore. You're out of touch. You're not human anymore.
I don't know. That scene actually ends with Conan kind of disturbed. He doesn't like the idea that the four winds are superior.
No, he doesn't. Yeah. He's like, oh, yeah.
It's kind of this mental game that they're playing about like whose culture is superior or something like that. It's not it's not equalist at all. It's very much a contest of like spiritual wits, and the sort of simple, brooding northern spirituality kind of can't compete with a more broad steppe, kind of exposed, you know, probably has influence from, you know, Stygian and every other culture, but
I think it beautifully portrays how, you know, Sudabai, he prays to the winds, and he's got the bow and arrow, you know, he's quick on his feet. And, you know, Conan's this big motherfucker with this huge sword from Atlantis, dude. He's like this earth-based dude. He's not light and sneaky. You know, he doesn't use a bow. And it shows in the film, they all have to come together to defeat evil. You know, like we can say, oh, the sky is bigger than the earth and the earth is stronger than the sky. But at the end of the day, they're all friends, and they're trying to work together, and they pray in so totally different ways. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, they're going to be laughing about it around the campfire, eating some Black Lotus, and just goofing off till the sun rises.
Well, I think we can make friends and we can have common causes, but we're ultimately not the same people, right?
No.
The distinguishing and separateness is important, I think. I don't think there's a healthy way to see everybody as a single entity.
I would even argue that should never be the goal. I think that is where you get into trouble. You try and flatten everything. I think they portrayed this really well in the new Fallout show. You know, like Vault-Tec, they wanted to, like, you know, spoiler alert, everybody. Have you guys seen it? I don't want to fucking go too deep into it.
You can spoil it.
Okay, so they nuke the fucking world because they're afraid of competition, and they want to make everybody the same. You know, her dad says, like, you know what the problem is? All these factions fighting. And the only way to make it is we got to kill them all, so there's only us. And that is the trap. That's the shit we got to get out of. That's what we've been doing for the past 2,000 years or so. And we've got to step away from that into something different.
Yeah, we keep burning people's progress and stuff, but it goes back to I don't remember who was it Koryos that just was speaking about like the separateness. Like there's a balance of understanding everybody's karmas and places in the human scale, like while also understanding the spiritual essence, and you have to hold both. Like it can't be dualistic, but of course you have to like swing on the pendulum to I think, do this work.
So
yeah, I
think everybody
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Ryan.
All right, real quick, just to touch up on what I said earlier. When I said national, like getting rid of national identity, or I don't actually mean like getting rid of it and tossing it out the window and just like forgetting all of your cultural past or whatever. I just mean like getting rid of that idea of seeing other people as the other. Kind of like with that Conan story where they have a good chuckle about their different gods and everything, and then move on. So that's all. That's all I wanted to clarify about my statement.
That's the difficulty, though, is that other people are other, right? When we have very different cultures, we cannot just pretend those differences don't exist. And having separate spaces is kind of how people have managed that tension, right? Like, we don't like those people over there. They're weird. They worship weird gods. They do evil, degenerate things. But, we have a border, and as long as that border is respected, we can trade spice for or whatever, right? So it's this Vedic idea of every sort of individual god being separate. I mean, they are ultimately all part of the one, but those separations are meaningful and important. It can't just be sort of smoothed out. In Fallout 1, if you haven't played it, does anyone care if I spoil the ending of Fallout 1?
Go for it.
Played it.
Go for it.
If you want.
It's a similar. I'm assuming this is where they got that for the TV show. It's a similar sort of antagonist. The super mutants, I'm sure, from every game, really well known. The master is this sort of horrible cyber insane entity that wants to make everyone the same with the forced evolutionary virus. He wants to turn everybody into a super mutant, so there's no conflict. Once everybody's the same, all differences will be resolved. There won't be any more war, and the master sees this as a good thing. And that is kind of the overarching problem in any sort of centralization of power, is that it hates competition, right? So that the tension between the authentic tribal founding people and the empire, the desire to expand and increase influence, kind of always ends up the same way. It always ends up diluted and no longer sure of itself, but in possession of incredible technological power, right? This just sort of happens every time, every single time. It's unfortunate. I think if there is a future without this cycle, it'll be people who have a historical perspective and appreciation of their tribal sort of founding totem spirit that will preserve them through the temptations of empire to keep sacrificing authenticity for a little bit more power, a little bit more influence here, a little bit better relationships with this other culture,
Yeah. I think it goes back to, though, like the realization, like, I don't remember, we're all kind of at a standstill where everybody's kind of confused to where to start, right? So Like,
Yeah.
we all have to accept that separateness, but how do we come together? Because we're all kind of in the same, like think of the Americas, like it's a mixing pot and everybody kind of doesn't really know what to do, but we're all together now.
Are we though? Are we together? We're in the same land.
Not in that way. Just like
at least here in this Discord, we're together. I mean, yeah, most of it I'd say not, but there are communities of people trying to knit together, their own little mycelium network of ideas, and that's definitely new, and that's definitely worth talking about.
That's why I shared the example of what I do, because it's again, it's an example of things making some sort of attempt.
I believe America is currently only held together by immense technological power. It is very much a late stage empire thing where no one has any idea what we're about or what our goal is. Like no one agrees on anything. Nobody has any sense of what it means to be America.
We're in the wasteland right now.
But there is just a tremendous amount of power. It just insane, right?
Yeah.
And anybody who can hold on to it for a few months kind of gets to dictate the media. It gets to dictate everything. Who gets bombed this week? It's strange to see play out in real time.
Very, very much so. Very much so. I don't know, all this kind of talk about, like, I suppose the separateness of I guess different people, but also I guess some sense of, in the spiritual sense, some shared essence being there too. I don't know, I think that's kind of like something that's like I suppose a razor's edge to walk, in the sense of kind of being like, okay, definitely, one might think like one culture is weird or whatever, and like what are they even doing? But I do kind of think regarding that it's also kind of about trying to find that balance, and like how you were saying, Koryos, to really try to find that balance between, I guess, like authenticity and I guess like wanting to expand, and like kind of trading authenticity for power. And I think that's it's a really good point that you brought up there. I do think there's a lot in that, and I kind of feel like, I don't know, that's something to be, I suppose, cultivated. We can't like just unite everyone kind of thing, but like I do think, with regarding smaller groups and kind of, I guess, suppose one could call them smaller tribes or communities of sort, where something like this could happen, with their own connection to the gods, their the totem that they're connected to, would be one important step into the future, into a different kind of future, where at least we can try to, I guess, I suppose, coexist. But there's always going to be some conflict, regardless.
Even in a totally homogenized human world where everybody has mixed so much, there's no longer a distinct ethnic group or races. You'd still have conflicts, right? People would still see themselves as physically separated in this land or that. They'd have different interests and different resources. They'd compete.
Yeah.
This idea that once we're all the same, war will be over. It's just the most naive, most destructive, nihilistic, anti-human thing.
Yeah, and that's also what creates cults. It's that, like you're saying, with the Fallout characters and everything. Like when you get obsessed with that sameness, you create something like a hive mind that could go with. I mean, I guess that's what a lot of religion is creating a hive mind, but it's also like you should be able to branch off in your own individual self.
Yeah.
I don't know what ancient tribes were like. I kind of imagine they weren't very tolerant of different ideas.
Yeah,
Like if you
probably.
didn't have the right gods, I don't know. I mean, I assume there is like room for freedom and individual expression within the framing of the tribe, and it probably wasn't nearly as defined as something like our, modern religions, which have massive
Yeah.
texts that just
Oh, definitely.
tediously describe all the different laws and tell you exactly what you're supposed to do, even if they contradict themselves. So I think there's just an inorganic flexibility within natural human tribes, but on the other hand, they could be extremely rigid, where if you worship the wrong gods, you'd just be killed by your brother or something, right? Like it was absolutely
Yeah.
mattered to conform, at least within this sort of culture that I'm never going to understand, this sort of organic human tribal culture.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Okay. I don't know. From all kind of the research I've been doing into all of this regarding the ancient tribes and the ancient, I guess, Indo-European cultures with their beliefs. They for sure had their own beliefs, and all the different tribes had their own specific versions of the gods. Even though for the Indo-Europeans, it kind of boils down to, I guess, like the Indo-Europeans and their gods, and kind of like how that organically evolved and all that. But there was, though, at least to some degree, this sense of understanding, like one pantheon through the lens of their own, or trying to, at least to some degree, like there being that understanding. But I do think generally, when it comes to these kind of like cultures and tribes, I mean, at some point, when it would go to like civilizations such as Rome, for instance, there was a lot of like mixing starting to happen, and much more of that kind of syncretism and these kind of aspects that took place. But then, in a more original sense, I do feel like the pantheons were wide enough, or like due to kind of the diversity of the different archetypes, or gods, you could call them, that were present, that the different people within the tribe still had their forms of expression. Like they could worship different particular gods that would more align with, well, who they are, or like more resonate with their goals or their particular way of life. And I do feel that that's kind of one big difference between kind of like the pagan way of life and more this like monotheistic kind of approach to, I guess, well, spirituality and these kind of elements. That with the ancient pagans, there's more of that room for it. But there's still, of course, limitations in there as well.
Were there gods that were illegal to worship in Rome? I know Rome is like a thing that exists over, I don't know, 2,000 years. It's tough for me to say anything specifically was Rome, but were there periods of time where they're like, you can't worship foreign gods?
Were there times when, well, I mean, I know for a fact that the worship of Dionysus got very restricted, moving in from Greece. They were very very suspicious of it. Then at the same time with Cybele, there was a lot of like, I don't know, suspicion regarding that as well. So they did with some of them allow that to exist, but they kept it at the margins basically, and they were very like suspicious, and they did like make laws regarding some of the cults that they didn't like, that were like not really aligned with the I guess the values of their pantheon. And kind of what they as a people went for. So they were kind of suspicious, and they did legislate against certain deities and.
So my understanding of
Expressions.
Rome is very surface level, and what we're traditionally taught was that they were hedonistic, at least at times, right? Big orgies and drunken festivals and whatever. So what in terms of their values would they not have liked about the Dionysian cults?
Well, actually, there were elements of, I guess, like the mixing of different people, no matter who they were, like no matter their social standing, basically, that they didn't like. They didn't actually like the hedonistic elements. At least the patricians did not like that.
I thought that was just kind of the normal Saturnalian festival, was where everything got inverted and everything was.
Well, yes, there's that element. There's that element, yes, that they had to it. But generally speaking, throughout the rest of the year, these things would be chained. Symbolically, the statue being chained of Saturn.
So the Dionysian cult just wanted to party 24/7?
Basically, yes. It started to. Okay. It used to be more at certain times of the year, but then once they went to the point of kind of going like 24/7, and it started to kind of like expand and go beyond the bounds that Rome was comfortable with. Then yes, they started to propose laws to try to curb all of that. So they did definitely do that.
That sounds like a good thing, right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there should be some bounds on it. I mean, I can see why one as a culture could not afford, like for people to go to these Dionysian revelries all the time. 'Cause, you can't really run a culture like that. But I mean, I suppose
you can't run a culture, but it's also kind of just not a meaningful life to be. You also kind of run out of novelty, right? Like part of that Saturnalian festivals, fun is that you're breaking the rules. You're breaking the normal restrictions, and for a while you get to be uninhibited. But if you're always uninhibited, that there's no fun to it. So I think, I mean, isn't the goal to have the proper balance of Apollonian and Dionysian?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's kind of the proper idea regarding that, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can definitely go out of hand, with either the Apollonian and the Dionysian. If it goes too much to one extreme or the other, it's kind of where that balance comes in, definitely. Yeah.
I was just taking that in, listening.
Okay.
Have you read The Birth of Tragedy?
Me? No.
Anybody? Yeah.
No.
I have, but it's been a very long time ago. I don't really remember all too.
Me neither. I just know that that's where these terms Apollonian and Dionysian come from. This dialectic.
Yeah. No, that's correct. That's definitely correct. I've been looking into that, from my own more mythological lens to, look at that with the detective. One other YouTuber that I talked to, and it's kind of like, fascinating stuff for sure. But I do kind of also feel that, I guess, regarding that, with the Apollonian and Dionysian, there's kind of like that split again with the more, I guess, like how the culture would see the more rational kind of sense, I mean, it's like the more, rational side of humanity, but also, the more instinctual side. And it kind of makes me kind of think about like, the disconnect from that instinctual kind of communal, tribal kind of side, which has its consequences. But, with the Dionysian, as, Dionysus is also intrinsically linked in the mysteries to the great goddesses as well, looking at, the state of things as they are, within the culture. There's kind of over time also kind of, not just a disconnect from that more primal communal side, but also the kind of the feminine side with it as well, the feminine, that sense of them linking to nature. The Jungians with that kind of say the unconscious, kind of with both the primal kind of nature kind of linked side, the instinctual. And I do feel with that that in itself links back very strongly to the gods as well, because the gods are originally, if we look at Rome and Greece, but also the Norse and the and kind of tracing that back to the Proto-Indo-European culture as well, it starts to get more and more primal in nature, more nature based. There was this progression from more of this nature, wilderness kind of based spirituality, with Rome, towards more like, city based spirituality, moving away from nature. But I do feel that in our modern age, that there is a real need to kind of like, how Neirum said, who had to sadly leave, kind of time to touch grass, to kind of like, get back down from our UFO back onto the earth, and with that kind of reconnect to nature, but also with the gods as well, that are linked to our human sense of vitality, but also the vitality of the world as well, because they're not just psychological constructs or archetypes within our psyche, but they also, link in a more pagan sense deeply with the world itself as well.
So this is not staying practical to my sort of original question of how you and I in our day-to-day lives revive the gods, but thinking super far ahead in the future, just by necessity of competing with other large nations, what does the European pagan revived nation look like? How does it compete with technological powerhouses and post-human dystopia? Like sending Borg soldiers after us, and how would we be the sort of elf, green deck in the Magic the Gathering that can realistically compete at a sort of massive national power level, but also remaining sort of authentic and connected to nature? Is that even a possible thing?
I feel like if we put so much emphasis on like competing and trying to like.
Well, what happens if you fail to compete?
Well, I'm not saying. I mean, I guess as like a more feminine person, like these aren't things that my intention goes towards, because I know realistically in this lifetime, it's not like I'm about to change the whole world. Like I can do what I can within myself and within like the community I can build.
Sure.
And destruction is always going to be a force that wills itself throughout time and space. And it's just, I think in this current predicament and current thing that is destroying, you're right. Like you do have to have those who are willing to compete and willing to bring that energy. I guess it's like everybody has to find a role. I don't know.
Yeah.
we don't need to be building a nation. You just need to talk to people and like revive real
right. You and I,
communication. It's going to
this
look
is not
different in every country or whatever, but it's the kind of practices and skills that we need to revive.
Of course, this is not a practical discussion for any of us.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if any of you think it's possible. Like
I think it's possible, and I think it goes back to the beginning of this conversation where we talk about reviving God's wife, or like the goddess has to be a part of this like journey. It can't just be like only the gods. Like there's got to be some sort of
what was Rome's mistake then? Because Rome was a pagan European empire. What if we had that again? How would we?
What was their intention? Like, what was their main? Like, what were the few main intentions they had? It was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of war, and that, of course, like dominates when you're,
But how do you compete at that level? And I'm just assuming you have to. Otherwise, you get conquered, destroyed, enslaved, humiliated. All the worst things possible happen to you if you're not a strong people. And so the incentive behind expansion is to increase your power, so that doesn't happen. But how do you stay authentic, increase your power, but also don't expand so much that you, I don't know, overexert your spiritual vitality, but also your physical resources to do so?
Well, it's good to know that, at least. I mean, sorry, there's a dog in the background. Please stop. I think, that's a good question. And I'm gonna keep saying I think everyone has their roles, and we really have to focus on community and taking it out of the bigger picture into the baby steps before we can even like spend too much energy exerting towards looking at the end goal. I think that's like the possibilities and the probabilities can change so often. It's hard to say what that answer could be.
I don't know. I guess for me, having looked into Rome and these different ancient cultures, I kind of think like with I guess I don't know. Egypt to some degree is like a good example that one can learn from. Suppose it's kind of like with them. I mean, it's kind of about finding a balance with the different deities. I know for a fact that with Rome, with Juno and kind of what she used to be in the more ancient archaic sense as sovereignty goddess, and it kind of like still connects in a more Proto-Indo-European lens also to like the sovereignty goddess of the Celtic people as well, that there used to be kind of this balance within these cultures, and you can see remains of that within both Rome and especially Greece as well, even though it started to become much more masculine, kind of dominated over time. But it used to be kind of this balance between the kind of what the sovereignty goddess represented, who had a say in matters of war, and kind of the community and kind of the masculine warrior deities. So think like, for instance, Mars, where kind of like the sovereignty goddess in that sense, what she symbolized, and with that kind of her priestesses kind of represented.
So, is there evidence for that the goddess worship was in decline as the empire declined?
Yeah, there is evidence regarding that, looking at the role of, for instance, Juno and different goddesses, how they became more I suppose, domesticated, more kind of like city-based, less connected to more the primal kind of nature side. The wilder side slowly being kind of like branched off to other feminine deities, kind of more kind of becoming tied to the home more instead. Where in the beginning with the more archaic, for instance with Rome, with for instance the goddess Veronia, but also with the Norse with Holda, and tracing that back to the more Neolithic time, can kind of see like how they kind of lost a lot of that sovereignty kind of aspect, even with Epona. She became like a goddess of just horses and kind of cavalry, where she used to have kind of this warrior sovereignty goddess vibe.
In the Iliad, the different goddesses are described as having sort of different power levels, essentially.
Yeah.
Athena and Juno obviously have great martial power.
Yeah.
And they just sort of enter the battlefield occasionally and do that sort of stuff. But Venus, interestingly, even though she's a goddess, is described as being, physically weak.
Yeah,
Artemis.
Her suit is not.
Yeah, you'd think her status as a goddess would just make her stronger than any mortal, but it's not how Homer is depicting it, at least.
Yeah.
Because Venus is like love and beauty, and that's seen as weak even today in the society. Like we view Venus as kind of like, I mean, she's a lot of power right now with like media and stuff, but we kind of wouldn't throw her into a war right now. But
she's not an overt use of power sort of goddess. Yeah. She deceives Helen by disguising herself as an old woman, but she doesn't disguise her boobs. So Helen sees right through it.
She's an illusionist. That's got some power to it.
Yeah. But, it's covert power, right? It's not the obvious direct power of Zeus or Athena or Ares.
But what I wanted to, kind of why I brought all of this up regarding these goddesses is that there used to be this balance, and you can see it most clear in the Celtic cultures regarding, the king and kind of like, the warriors with that, and the sovereignty goddess, how there's that connection there, and these ancient rites that they had as well, where she played, and with that her priestesses played an important role in kind of like tempering the warriors. They had a say regarding starting and ending wars, where the warriors, would then go on the war path when they did. And I kind of feel like it's kind of the kind of a tribal way, a way for the tribe to try to prevent that overexertion of the more masculine warrior aspects, in that sense, like when needed going out, but also kind of having that, I guess, like feminine balance to it that can basically be like, maybe now the conquering is enough. Maybe we need
I don't know. I mean, I think the women wanted their men to be brutal. They wanted their men to go kill their enemies and bring back treasure. I don't think they were a kindness sort of femininity. I think it was more like, support us, bring us back goodies.
Well, you can see one example I can bring up is regarding Romulus and Remus, like how the women of the women stopped the warriors and kind of were like, no, now the fight is enough. They with that ended the conflict between the Romans and the I think it was the Sabines, the
Well,
Latin, and the Latin
I mean,
people.
the conflict ended when they possessed the Sabine women, right?
No, there was like still ongoing conflict after that, and then the Sabine women actually were the ones to were to the warriors on both sides. They like walked into the battlefield, and they were like, "Now it's enough." And
I don't know. I kind of just suspect that ancient women were just as brutal as ancient men. I think it was very much a tribal, violent, animal competition sort of thing. The feminine side of it is that the Koryos. The Koryos have to come home and be men.
Yeah.
They have to be safe for women and children. They can't just be the berserkers out in the wilderness, just constantly stealing and
Oh yeah,
just
but
totally
but that's what I
unable
mean.
to operate in normal society. Well, I think the sense I got was that you were saying that there's this moderating effect that the feminine has on men. And I think it's kind of the opposite. I think more often than not, it's the women encouraging the men to go out and kill people and take their stuff.
I don't know.
It was there's different eras.
Sure. There's subtlety within that, but I think there's a misconception that women were kind.
Well, yeah, that's the issue we have with society now. A lot of women, including myself, are always trying to be like, oh, just because like this stereotype has been put on us, like doesn't necessarily mean our entire identity is just the nurturer. But it's it's still an important aspect. But
the Bible actually has an account of the what are they called? The people, the disciples. Some of the disciples visit a town in, I think, Greece. I think it was currently occupied by. It was in Turkey. I think it was a Greek city though, occupied by the Greeks. And they go in, and there's a temple of Artemis, and they just start demanding that they tear down the temple of Artemis. It was really weird. It's just.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of later in the near end, second half at least, the New Testament, and they say no, we're not going to tear down your temple to Artemis. So they put them in prison, and then they summon an earthquake and destroy the city. It's very very strange. I mean, kind of like impositional and bizarre for them to expect them to destroy their sacred sites. And they let them in the city in the first place, knowing that they were going to evangelize a foreign religion. It's just and it's interesting that Artemis is the goddess that's destroyed. She's kind of the most wild, least feminine of the
And she's still represented by the moon though. She's highly intuitive. And like that's the thing that I really wanted to mention is like the feminine within all of us, like introduces us to intuition, which then introduces us to that shamanic place we're all, talking about reviving the gods in. And like she was wild though, and it was about fertility and vegetation and all of those things, but the aspect of the moon isn't like a force that like Venus I mean it can really bring you to some places, but it's a silent power.
I just think it's interesting that women, goddesses had to be tamed and contained into purely sort of domestic nurturing roles. I mean, and mothers are great. We need mothers, and we need feminine, caretaking women. But it's been.
I guess that's why we're all here talking about all the different archetypes and everything, because we need them all.
We do kind of need them all, and I do think kind of with figures like Artemis, and that's kind of why a part of it, what I brought up regarding the sovereignty goddess and that kind of like archetype too. It's there's that aspect to it. Like, yes, they had the say regarding starting wars, so definitely they encouraged their men to fight, but also ending wars as well. And I do think, like, obviously the men had a definite say in it as well, but I do.
Yeah, there's lots of variations within that, but the general big contrast you can make is, pretty obvious. The sort of technological power of a patriarchal society is clear, right? They've been very successful. I do sort of just suspect there is a longevity, sustainability problem in repressing all your assertive female archetypes.
Yes.
Also
it's
makes
also
me
just
think,
sad. It's just sad to see women in psychological chains or physical chains.
Well, what you bring up kind of brings me to this realization, going back to the silent powers of like Venus, the illusionist, or like how the moon also represents illusion, or the subconscious world, your fears and stuff. Like, I think a lot of it starts with, like I said, that basic structure, which is starting with yourself and going into the catacombs of your own unconscious world and your dream state, and kind of creating a language with her through understanding the dream state, so you can see how to gauge where we can clean up the mess, or we can fight back, or strengthen parts of ourselves, like, because a lot of it just seems like silent work right now.
So you think the dreams are inherently goddess domain stuff?
I mean, I think the dream world could be represented by many different goddesses, gods, different places around the world, but I think the moon for me is inherently feminine, and like the goddess can communicate really well through you in the dream world and kind of guide and direct your intuition and the probability tunnels that you can go down if you actually listen to what she's trying to filter through the subconscious world.
But
receptivity. Yeah.
I mean, from a more Jungian lens, that's dreams is kind of like, where the communication with the the archetypes are, and there's the general layer regarding that, that's more, I guess, with dreams, that's more, I guess, superficial and less archetypal. But then there's the archetypal stuff as well. There's differences regarding that in dreams. But then it does, from more Jungian lens, give one, that's one way how to, I guess, like, in a more personal manner, reconnect with the archetypes, and with that, with the gods as well. It's one way how to do that, to do that inner work, that inner initiation that takes place. But then there's the kind of, like, I suppose this is more the esoteric path, but then there's also kind of the outward kind of ritualistic kind of aspect of it as well, that goes into I would say, like how we talked about way earlier regarding stories and myth, but also regarding kind of like rituals and more like communal aspects of all of this as well. I do kind of feel like one part of this which is important right now, at least where we're at, and that is kind of where we're at, is that I do kind of feel like there's that personal connection definitely, which is necessary right now, but then at the same time, that communal aspect does exist to it as well, and needs to be like slowly then cultivated as well. But the matter of the fact is that like thinking about, for instance, the Indo-European, like pagan spirituality, and I guess that's really the case with a lot of different cultures all over the world as well right now. There's a disconnect, with the more ancient, archaic aspects of their culture, their ancient spirituality, and it's not going to be like a journey that is easy or is going to be straightforward, or that we can just flawlessly kind of like, revive the gods in a manner, and what they represent within us, and through story and all that, in a way that's exactly how it was in the past. But I do think, though, that the gods and the archetypes are, like alive within us, and we can, like feel their pull through stories and even dreams. And I do feel like, through that kind of exploration through stories and dreams, and kind of trying to figure out what we can about, the ancient rituals, and kind of adapting these things to our more modern sensibilities, that we can, like start to at least take some baby steps towards, getting somewhere where this would be more revived. But I do want to add that I don't think, this means that we have to get rid of all the, the technology stuff, or certain aspects of our culture right now that are useful. But I do feel it's kind of more of, I suppose, a reformation, and kind of linking back towards important parts of, what we missed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the gods are downstream of the archetypes, right?
Yeah.
It's like the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao.
Yeah.
So it's not going to look like the old gods. And of course, you can hunt and poke around history to find what you need, but that is also reliant on our view and our narrative of history as this kind of linear progression of technology that we hold in the West. So, it's about kind of rekindling this interface with the archetypes, which is going to have layers of cultural and personal attached to it, and then the gods are going to come out of that, and then gods are downstream of archetypes, and then downstream of the gods is how an individual and groups and gender roles function within a society. It's kind of like a trickle down is the way that I kind of see it, but you have to begin attempting to realize those eternal archetypes.
So I feel like Tom Rosell, the Survive the Jive guy, would just sort of insist that we just start worshiping the gods. We just do it.
Yeah, and I like him, but I also, I don't really agree with. I don't think we can just turn the clock backwards.
Well,
Time zero only goes one direction for us.
I mean, I haven't performed a bloat yet, or any sort of thing, but if we were going to follow his sort of philosophy, that's what we would tell everyone to do, right? It's just go do it. Go perform a bloat. Doesn't matter if you believe in it or not. Once you start doing it, you can start calling yourself Odinist or whatever. But I don't know. And he would say that you worship them as gods, right? You don't worship them as archetypes. I don't fully understand what that process would be for you, or what it's been for you of working with the archetypes and then working with the gods. To me, I guess I would just have to know more about what archetypes mean for you. I only know the sort of basic Jungian idea.
Well, I can go into that myself, because I've been down this whole, I guess, like rabbit hole for quite some years now. I think almost like 3 years, with kind of like archetypes and the gods and that kind of thing. I don't want to like take too long, but kind of what it really boils down to, looking at the inner work I was doing, and kind of like, I guess, stripping away all these different layers, is kind of started to boil down to not just worshipping the gods in some like just a ritualistic manner, or like just performing just the right actions, but it really was about just interacting with the dream world, and through that, I suppose, well, the dream world, but also I guess the myths that I would read, and the different deities I would look into that would speak to me greatly. Wotan being, for instance, one of them, and also Artemis, and different such figures. It's kind of like through the combination of myth and dream, kind of starting to cultivate that relationship with them. And that relationship is not something along the lines of some distant kind of disembodied force that just floats there somewhere outside in the world, but it's very much about kind of like it's there outside in the world, but it's also within us as individuals at the same time as well. Like there's that deep connection to it as well. From a Jungian lens, it kind of boils down to, I guess they would say, meta instinct, or like kind of like the more deeper instinctual kind of primal layers of human consciousness. And it's kind of about cultivating a relationship with that, because the thing is that within the psyche, there, the archetypes are not just these abstract things. They're in that sense living beings, living entities in that sense, and through myth and going deeper into these dreams, and for me, I guess also the shamanic journeys that I've done, started to get more attuned to these energies of the archetypes, and with that, slowly the gods more and more, and kind of like working with these energies, and through that kind of being guided to do particular actions, it's kind of like the Koryos ritual I did in the woods, for instance, being not just a ritual in the sense of just performing an act, but it's kind of more of a communion with the deities and spirits linked to that, like more like a lived reality in that sense, like both like emotional but also deeply spiritual in nature, kind of like this kind of I guess this sacred relationship that's then established in that way with them. And it's more I feel more about that than just the simple act of the ritual itself.
Mm-hmm. Has that been a similar process for you, Raine?
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. As far as like the shamanic aspect and everything like that, I really don't go as deep as Base does. Mine is like, my whole thing is really just we all need to chill out on the silicone obsession on the phones and everything, and just get back to nature and stop relying on all these top-down infrastructures to do everything for us. And we have the internet. We can reach people all over the world and create a global community, not a nation or an empire, but a global community from the ground up. And getting back to nature is kind of bringing the goddess back, pulling the grail.
So
retaking the grail, or whatever you want to call it. And that's probably pretty basic and just kind of a step one, but that's where we're at as a humanity.
Well, you mentioned archetypes are downstream of gods. Is that like a personal experience you've had, or just kind of
well, again, like I said, I coupled it with the quote of the Tao, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Like the archetypes are beyond culture, they're beyond the individual, beyond culture, beyond nations. It's beyond human, even. Like it resides in the mystery of consciousness itself. So in between archetypes and humanity is the gods. Those are the things that we, as a culture, kind of construct to some degree to interface with the eternal archetypes.
Okay.
Is the way that I understand it.
Basically, yeah.
Because I don't think consciousness is tethered to humanity. If we wiped ourselves off the face of the earth, I think consciousness will arise again in some way or another.
Yeah.
In fact, it would never fall. It wouldn't need to rise again because it would never fall. It's still there.
Yeah, exactly.
That is just the basic understanding of all spiritualities.
Yeah.
The materialist would say that without physical brains doing consciousness, there wouldn't be any consciousness.
Basically, yeah.
Which is why I see myself as allied with the Christians, even though I'm not a Christian and I see problems with it. Ultimately, we're at war with the materialists. There's really two major sides to the current conflict: the people who are nihilistic and
Well, I think
probably life-hating at the end of the day, but yeah, the materialists who see no the consciousness beyond the material brains and silicone chips.
I think there's such a huge conversation you can go on about materialism and materialists and just the general, again, the goddess, the earth being the material, the matrix, you can't be born into this vessel without the mother, without the material world. It's I guess it's just a matter of how you go about using the materials and the elements, and that's our issue.
Well, I think the spiritualist would see the material world as still part of the spiritual world in a way. It's just kind of the lowest order. Whereas the materialists make a hard divide and just say, no, there's no spiritual dimension.
Yeah.
There's nothing beyond the raw atoms and mechanics that we understand and can manipulate to, bioengineer and computerize and whatever else.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what the materialist side of things were, but I was gonna
assume. I mean, there are all kinds of different views on the material world within spiritual ideologies, but the modern materialists, are distinctly atheistic. I mean, I think atheists have always kind of existed, but no, they're kind of something new in the sense that they really hate any suggestion that there's something beyond this material existence, our world.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like an ego thing would be my guess. They kind of hate the idea that we're the lowest order of existence. It kind of hurts their feelings to see gods above them. I don't know. I'm not sure what it's about.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like the ego and the demiurge thing that I was talking about at the beginning of the call. Just a little reality that isn't all of, consciousness itself.
Well, I think they need to. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think they need to take a deep breath. Walk outside at night, go look up at the stars,
touch grass,
tell the stars how they feel, what they think their place in the universe is, and wait a real long time for the stars to answer them back.
Well, they won't even ask. Because they're like, well, I already know what that star is, so I don't
know. No, they'll look up in the sky and see no God, and they'll just declare that means there's no God. You can look up in a telescope. There's no heaven up there. Of course, it means, there's no God.
Yeah, it's a really bleak perspective to walk around the earth with. We could all just go touch grass and
Well, I think it is just kind of part of the cycle. If you read the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is complaining about all the demon worshippers and the atheists, right? Even back then, like there's this part of this cycle where people lose touch with God, and there's these different sort of materialistic and Gnostic cults that pop up, that are sort of anti the gods. I mean, you could call it demonic or whatever, but it's fundamentally kind of a materialistic inversion of the celestial order.
Well, the Gnostics believed in a creator. I think they were just terrified of the world that they lived in. Steiner has I just very recently got into him, so I'm not going to try and pretend to be an expert on the subject, but one of his kind of main threads is these two very big impulses in humanity, the Ahrimanic and I forget if he calls it Luciferian or Satanic. I really appreciate all these pompous Germans that take other people's concepts and completely redefine them. Really, really helps cut down on the confusion of the topic. But you have the Ahrimanic, which is the Ahrimanic is just the material world. It's people that only believe in the material world, and that's a trap, right? And this is what's driving technological advancement. And then you have the Satanic or Luciferian, and those are the people that, like the Gnostics, that completely kind of give up and say that the spirit world is the only thing that matters, and like Buddha in the woods eating dirt before he became the Buddha or whatever. And you're kind of supposed to balance these two drives. And I think where we're at now, where we have this such harsh split and divide between the material and spiritual, it's just further evidence of whatever the architecture of consciousness that once used to live in these religions and these traditions that we have, at least in their mainstream forms, are so degenerate that all we see is it's just all black and white. And when you get black and white and you don't fight the evil in yourself, you go out and try and conquer evil elsewhere, hoping that will solve the issue. And like the loss of the goddess is a loss of our sense of home, our sense of community. Even in, I guess, like medieval Christianity and all that, they had, I think the Holy Spirit was probably in place of this mother goddess, and they did that at church, right? So obviously they didn't feel very connected to their communities or their countries, so they got it at church, which is again kind of like comic books. It's like it's attempting to scratch that itch. They feel the realization, but it's not executed properly because they lack this consciousness architecture to realize the goddess archetype.
Right.
And it just further speaks to a continuing duality of infighting, political infighting, even the war, men versus women. It's huge right now. Right now.
Yeah.
It just more and further divide and infighting until your entire cultural awareness is collapsing. It's we don't even have spiritual or consciousness architecture. We're not even at that level yet. We're like trying to hold up.
I have to wonder
our society, our civilization.
I feel like there's a lot of tension that is inherent to our condition, and all our work with the gods is kind of trying to manage that.
Yeah.
And obviously you could encourage these sort of natural problems humans have if you wanted to destroy people. But you wouldn't have to. You could just remove our gods and watch us decay over time. I think there's like a natural tension between men and women, for example, that has to be sort of resolved. We have to sort of negotiate this inherent sort of conflict of interests. But
like in these spaces, it's obviously like anytime I'm on Discord, like there's not that much of like a presence of women, and I'm really trying to figure that one out. I wish it was less seen as like a masculine territory that like doesn't invite other women with this kind of curiosity.
Is that specific to this server or all Discord?
No, I mean, I guess like a server like this. I'm in several like Discord servers that have this similar intention, and most of them, like I don't really. And it's not that men are doing anything, it's that women just like have this assumption for so long that we're stupid or like we don't have something valid to say that we don't even attempt to go into spaces like that.
There is a big difference in how we think, I think, and that's going to kind of create inherent dissonance. And without a sort of sophisticated tribal structure, I mean, the internet's not going to be able to provide that. Or
I guess it's just an example. It's like beyond the internet. That was like the one kind of example I jumped at really fast.
I don't I don't disagree with you. I think it's a good observation. I don't think there is a solution without the return of our gods. without like a real physical in person sort of tribal.
Well, yeah, I guess it's just like something more so I guess in my personal experience I'm questioning, because as a woman who is very much like trying to stay on this wavelength and this intention, like being around women and in women's spaces where we can be vulnerable, like I'm seeing that there's like a lack of self-belief, and that's because of the like, kind of the eraser of the goddess and just many of the archetypes there not being recognized within, which then projects the shadow of like, it's all men's fault. Like, let's point and use the masculine archetypes that we're all conditioned with to like figure it out. And
I think there is just an inherent massive conflict between men and women. I think we're kind of just inherently at war, and without a great deal of sophistication and sort of wise leaders and tight social bonds, those conflicts just kind of come right out, right? We just view the full demonic reality of humanity. I appreciate you being here and putting up with us, but
no, I'm not putting up with you. I'm very. I don't feel like there's much of a gender thing going on right now. We're just all peopling, but there's that separateness that we recognize.
So I think like I envision my sort of future tribal society as having distinct spaces for men and women. Obviously, the majority of the time we're just together, but I think men and women probably need their own separate cults. Essentially, they need their own private sort of practices.
Yeah,
and, like,
I agree with
they
that.
need their own sort of hierarchies. There needs to be like a queen and a king, and they take their men and women aside and do separate things some of the time and sort out their conflicts and hierarchy struggles.
Even with the Koryos stuff, I mean, like, it sounds like the women were kind of child rearing or from a kid's perspective, you are with the mothers since it was more communal raising, and then you were handed off to the fathers. So there was a definite like delineation, however you pronounce that word, of roles. And I'm not saying we have to go back to that. A lot of that was hinged on survival, and we have more room to alter those theories. But so yeah, for one, Discord is attached to gaming. It was originally a gaming thing. Right. It's geared toward gaming, so that's part of it. But to also circle this around to Jungian psychology. So I mean, he has the concept of the anima and the animus. And so the anima is the woman within the man. And this is also the gateway to like integration and greater wholeness. So if these ideas were more popular and people did the integration process more, via the Jungian way, then men would be kind of in communication with their anima more, integrating more of their unconscious. and women would be integrating their animus more. I'm less familiar on that concept, but I imagine it's the same way. It's the bridge to greater wholeness and your unconscious. And so this divide and this tension would alleviate to some degree, because we, like, instead of being on the far ends of the spectrum of gender roles, then there would be a little bit more overlap, and we would understand each other a little better, and be able to communicate to a much better degree, and not just want to consume rage bait in the cultural time.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If you can start with yourself and go within, and again find spaces like these or just books or whatever to do that, you're right. It does bring you closer to those who are aligned with that.
And then there's no people in power telling you what the roles are, because you have found them within yourself and helped other people find it within themselves. And then you get a whole mass of people that are more individuated, more self-reliant, and they have more cohesive communities from the ground up, and are less reliant on top-down structures to tell them how to be and how to do and what to think.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to recognize, like, especially in this group right now. Like, we're obviously people who are trying to lead the way or find some sort of community structure that we can revive that energy of union within. And it's really important to be patient and, like, talk about these things and kind of reflect before, I think, entering these spaces of community and creating them, because otherwise, I don't know, I feel like it could get really out of hand and go so far off what we were trying to do.
Well, my primary experience on the internet has been one of witnessing mental illness, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's what you're referring to when you're saying it can go off the rails or whatever.
Yeah, like,
but
just shadow projection, a lot of, psychosis and
I mean,
delusion.
I think it's very simply just a function that the people who spend the most time on the internet and the people you're most likely to encounter are the least functional in real life. And so anytime you join a D&D group or a D&D, community, it's gonna be dominated, probably controlled by people with really weak social real life skills. Probably
I
with
mean, yeah, I could see that. Just in person though as well, like, if you look around, and I'm a community person, I'll go to events all the time and try to find, like, a consistent space. It's there too. I mean, it's not just on the internet.
Some of it,
Like, people with yoga, for example, like, most of those spaces are predominantly just egoic spaces right now.
I would be willing to say that just like the entire West is just done. Like the people are corrupt, and there'll be a few individuals who can kind of self-teach wisdom essentially, and kind of limp across the finish line towards helping the next generation have a better life. But yeah, I would have a very low expectation for just about any community you encounter in the West, America and Europe. I think we're done.
Yeah, it won't be like the Bronze Age collapse, like we're good taxpayers, and we value order. So I think it would be more like
mental decay.
The power structures would change to some degree. There would be mental decay, yes, but we also have the opportunity and the freedom and some degree of stability to keep ideas alive and swap and exchange them and try and spread them, and if things even get financially rough or whatever, you do have the opportunity to get some land and live off that, which again feeds back into ideas of community and returning to nature and all the other things that we've been talking about too. And you're going to want stronger family bonds, so you want to integrate more of your unconscious. So it's all still the same things we're talking about.
Yeah.
America has more opportunities for like whatever you're talking about, like homesteading or off-gridding.
Oh yeah.
I'm not so sure about Europe. I mean, the land prices in Europe are much greater.
Yeah, that's kind of true in many areas. I want to say bring up regarding, I guess, the what you had mentioned regarding the different spaces for men and women. That is something that the ancient pagan cultures had as well. With it's kind of like think the Koryos, but also the with Artemis, with the Archetypal and these kind of things too. So there's that kind of there's that kind of element too, and I do feel that that's definitely something that's important. But I do feel kind of one side of it is that's kind of what you had brought up too about that, Koryos, regarding that with the gods being important in that too, and I do personally feel that was an important part of these kind of rites of passage and these kind of initiation rites, really what they were to kind of create that kind of the breaking away from the family kind of that happened through that, but at the same time kind of like so there was like connecting with their own, I guess, gender in that way, but also after that through the heroes gamos, the sacred marriage, and kind of a marriage ceremony at a later point, kind of this reintegration into the tribe as a whole as well. And I kind of feel that's also kind of part of like what we're talking about here too regarding community and these kind of aspects that I feel is kind of missing as well within the culture. Remember something that I had read regarding Carl Jung, where it kind of goes into how if individuals are still kind of tied up with their family more and haven't really, I guess, gone inward that much, or at least like had the opportunity, I suppose, to go out into the world. It's kind of another way of doing it too. Either way, that kind of from what Jung had written keeps one kind of stuck in a more kind of unconscious childlike state that's not truly kind of like consciousness. From what he kind of started to paint a picture of regarding these things is kind of like it's when we would go through such rites of initiation and doing either the inner work or forging our own path in that way, that we would kind of like bring consciousness into it more, I guess, more in a more conscious manner, like in the sense of that we become more self-aware of what's going on within us, but also within the world and with the gods as well. I do feel that that's kind of one aspect of all of this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, rites of passage. I'm definitely thinking about that one right now and how it's really important for community to have that.
Well, it's what helped them to like these kind of rituals with for both men and women, but also the coming together in that sense, in a more tribal sense at the end. It is kind of like what creates these bonds between individuals as well. They would go through different trials and kind of like rituals together that would forge these kind of bonds that are otherwise kind of like, you know, more difficult to create. I do feel like, you know, that's an important aspect as well. I suppose, like, you know, modern, I guess, like, religions are trying to, you know, do that to the degree that they do, but I do feel like that there's a real value, you know, in the pagan sense, you know, for there being that space for men and women, you know, so they can kind of like, have that space to explore the different sides of themselves without their, you know, being the other gender around.
I almost see men and women as two different tribes, like even within the same tribe. Like, and I kind of feel like those separate sacred times and separate gods and goddesses helps them sort of figure out what their order is, and who's in charge and what their sort of values are.
Yeah.
And then the time spent in the community is almost like a parlay between the two different tribes, even though it's probably the majority of the time spent existing.
Yeah. At least it was like interconnected.
Yeah.
It's interconnected, but it's also like a recognition of the competing desires at play, the two different tribes. I mean, I think as a species, men and women really have very different priorities. In the most sort of ancient sense, men would be the ones to die in a conflict with another tribe, and the women would be the ones to join the new tribe, right? So women kind of had to develop a more a willingness to.
I guess it depends where.
Depends. It's that's just kind of the most common tendency. It's not it's not all.
Yeah.
But women had to be more friendly, more willing to adapt to a new group of people, more willing to make compromises, whereas the men in a conflict would usually just die. That's kind of our job, is to win or die, and the values of those men and their gods kind of died with them, and depending on the flexibility of the new tribe, the women would have to absorb or adopt a new god, or be allowed to bring in their goddess or goddess.
But I do feel like, you know, there are, but then at the same time there are instances where I remember one, maybe it was Norse, where the women, was it Norse or was it Sparta? I don't know. I don't really remember right where that was from, but I can remember one story where actually the men were out to fight their enemy, but then their enemy was all were trying to then attack their city, and it was actually the women that then ended up defending it. So it kind of depends.
Probably an Indo-European group of women.
It was an Indo-European group of women.
That's kind of the exception to the rule. I mean, you think of Valkyries and Shield Maidens and Amazonians. Yeah, there's a story about some Indo-European group. I think it's in, I want to say, not the Middle East, but a little north of that, Caucasus maybe, where the men determined their enemies to be unworthy of fighting, so they sent out their women. So I don't know. I don't know how much of that is true or not. But there are certainly exceptions to the rule. But yeah, the rule is generally that women didn't do the fighting because they knew they would, be spared. They wouldn't have to die, and I assume most men wouldn't want their women to die.
Yeah.
So they were encouraged to just join the new tribe if they lost. I think that's how it worked for the most part. Unless they determined the enemy tribe to be so brutal and so unworthy of trust, that they didn't expect to be treated well with the new tribe. I don't know. I'm sure all that was part of their many anxieties in the ancient world.
Yeah. One thing I do want to bring up with that, though, regarding those different ritual spaces for both men and women, what we were talking about regarding that, and the kind of the different tribes, or like within the tribe kind of idea. I do kind of feel that that's kind of like a part of kind of the reality, that there are these differences, but I guess it's also about learning to, that's I guess like where the what you were saying, the whole parlay kind of idea, I guess would come in. It's kind of about having that space apart, but also having that kind of I guess like trying to cultivate that understanding that this is this particular, I guess, reality as it is. Some acceptance regarding such things, but also the realization, like, well, obviously we need to work together. So otherwise the tribe won't work.
I think the ancient world understood conflict very well. Understood that it was just sort of inherent. Like, at least for me, I'm very conflict avoidant, I'm terrified of it. But I think the ancient world experienced it so much, there was no sense of being able to avoid it. Conflict between individuals, conflict between men and women, conflict between different tribes. So their whole spiritual world was centered around managing that, resolving it if possible, fighting if they had to.
Yeah.
The harmony that the gods brought, I think, was the whole point.
Yeah.
Harmony between you and the natural world, balance, a cycle.
Definitely.
Well, if you didn't like being forced into conflict, then you got with your tribe and you packed up your bags and you walked over to the next plot of land. Unfortunately, we have run out of plots, but
There's lots
I
of
guess
land
that's
in the west. There's
that's
just
the
not a
next
lot of
step.
water.
Yeah. We could always go live in the snow again.
I mean, if you're willing to live off grid, there's tons of land. It's just kind of like, I'm used to modern conveniences, and that'd be a big step for me. I'd have to have a group of people supporting me and a therapist and
Oh gosh, yeah. So you don't know.
I like the foothills, but there's it's not always available.
Yeah.
I'd say get to the mountains. I think mountain people survive catastrophes very well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just because the mountains are always hard to live in, but
yeah, they really get isolated though, and that's kind of like
that's a goal.
That's
the thing.
Isolate yourself from the modern diseases.
Yeah, but then you like gotta have that other discussion with yourself about community, and I guess like with the internet, we're talking about this global community, so that's
right.
kind of
You'd need this small group of people at least.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I don't know how you're feeling about it, but we've been going for like almost like 2 hours already.
Yeah, I don't want if other people want to hop in the next one, I don't think we should have to be forced to listen to too long of a first podcast, and we laid out a lot of basics and set direction for a lot of other topics as well.
I hope I didn't derail us too much. This is my first time, and I was excited to talk. So thanks for having me.
No, I don't think you derailed it much at all. We really wanted to just take it very wiggly today. There were some flow notes and some rough ideas we hit on, but generally, no, it's all okay. And glad to have you on, Koryos. Same with you, Kyrsten, and you again as
nice
well,
to hear from you guys on VC.
Yeah, actually, I think this is the first time I'm talking to you, Raine. So good to meet you.
Yeah,
and Koryos, do like the questions you're asking, because they're valid, and it does tie into this conversation of reviving the gods.
Oh yeah,
Thanks.
for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I feel a little less politically aligned with the left. So I don't know if I ever say anything inappropriate for the space, just let me know and I'll tone it down. But yeah, thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, I do want to like just add, I suppose, just for everyone here and I guess the listeners too. I mean, here in the Fox Den, I'm really just, I don't know, we're not really aligned to any particular, I guess, political or ideological anything. So
I hate all of them.
yeah,
So, yeah.
kind of same. But like, yeah. So the thing is regarding that, like, no, it's fine as long as yeah, as long as everyone is okay with it, then it's gonna be fine. I'll let you
I've
know
been in
if
both
you.
Western camps and I hate both of them. So
My thoughts tend to drift towards hard problems of how people survive and how they
Yeah.
don't get enslaved and humiliated generationally. So like
Yeah.
I tend to be more on the severe side of concerns, but I like that I can come here and be balanced out by a more sort of healing.
well, a lot of those things are just beyond
Yeah, if I don't have control of
us in
something.
BC. Like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna? You can shake your fist at the gods all you want, but like I said, walk out at night and look up to the stars and tell them how you feel. See if they give you an answer one way or another, but probably just left with your own thoughts.
True. Yeah. If you
Yeah.
don't have any control in a situation and you just feel kind of like you're looping on something, it's better to just go touch grass and try to soothe the senses, which it is tourist season, so.
Yeah.
I am always kind of interested in the bigger, longer term pictures, but yeah, it's good to come back down to earth and focus on the day to day and what I can do in my lifetime.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think it's important for those people to be interested in the long term. So it's very valid.
Yeah. Very much so. And I think, yeah, with that said, I want to wrap up this episode and just want to say once more, thank you for being here and, yeah, bringing your own wisdom to this round table.
Thank you, Base.